The theme of the conference this year is putting the patient in the driver's seat. We have been catching up with some of the conference organisers and delegates to learn more about this topic.
When you want to put the patient in the driving seat, then the critical thing is patient empowerment. And I think the key take-home messages about that at this conference has been just how to do that. What is it you have to put in place to really empower the patient? And we've had a number of sessions that have looked at that in a lot of detail. Then I think we've also learned that we've got to be better at giving information to patients, perhaps not overloading them with stuff, but providing them information in a sort of regulated way which helps them understand it and engage in the problem. And then we've also learned that patients are going to get much more from that information if it's in a structured format. So if you have a patient decision aid or some sort of aid which helps the health professional and the patient talk to each other in a sort of structured way.
Balancing what a patient wants and what's best for their health is a big difference. A doctor wants the patient to live as long as possible. The patient wants to get as much quality of life out of the rest of their life compared to longevity. So a patient might be very happy to get 5 good years with a better quality of life, where a doctor might want to give them 10 years of maybe a poorer quality of life. So I think the patient's wishes have to dominate, but it takes time for the patient to learn which they want and where the balance is. And it's actually the patient who learns that rather than the doctor. EuroPD is going a long way to training the nephrologists about the option of peritoneal dialysis across Europe. I mean, hemodialysis is widely available, but peritoneal dialysis is not equally as available. So there's only maybe the majority of patients have a choice, but all patients should have a choice between these two treatment options, and that's what EuroPD is helping to provide.
My name is Sally Casey and I'm a clinical nurse coordinator in King Faisal Specialist Hospital in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. So our patients often being remote, especially our paediatric population, when we have problems with these patients, like if they have suspicious cloudy fluid that they think might be peritonitis, exit site infections, problems with flow, problems with their machine breaking down, many of the problems that our PD patient population would face in all countries. Unfortunately, these patients are not close by, so we have to meet this challenge by managing them from a distance. Our patients are unable to join a hemodialysis program because of the remote areas they live in. There's no hemodialysis centres close by, so this is why they choose peritoneal dialysis as a lifestyle. They wouldn't choose any other method. In comparison to being on hemodialysis, they have great flexibility in their life.
So, Monica, we had now a complete session on quality of life in our patients. Can you just briefly try to explain how important is it really, the quality of life?
I think quality of life is one of the most important indicators of our performance, really, towards our patients. We tend to forget, we tend to think about the numbers like KT/V, hemoglobin or albumin as the most important outcomes measures, while I think quality of life is very important. It is difficult to assess.
Because as you were saying, we are looking to KT/V, we are looking to albumin, we are looking to blood values, anemia control. These are all numbers. So I presume that doctors might like to have some numbers on the quality of life.
We need these numbers, so I think we need good tools that can measure some items or some domains in quality of life.
Now, quality of life is typically something which is very difficult to measure in type of numbers. Can you shortly explain how that can potentially influence the therapeutic perseverance or perseveration of physicians?
Well, I think that, of course, scoring systems are very important, at least for performing studies and randomized controlled trials. But I think in a daily assessment it's not so easy, and it will never capture the complete view of the patient. I think that the complete view of the patient can be captured by opening yourself to the patient and by feeling what he wants. Most of the patients talk with much more with the nurses than with the physicians openly.
We should try to think broadly about quality of life. That is not only physical symptoms, there are social, emotional, spiritual symptoms, which are very difficult to assess, especially by nephrologists. Patients really want us, nephrologists, to be their psychologists, to cover all this care. And if we don't know how to do it, we should sort of have help from palliative care.
So can we conclude that indeed having this multidisciplinary approach, just talking about the quality of life of the patients, how it is perceived by the patient and by the team, is probably fundamental if we really want to go on improving the quality of the care?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you.
So my project, which is called Decide, is about improving the way research information presented in guidelines is presented to its users. Its users might be health professionals, doctors, nurses, but it might also be members of the public, consumers of healthcare. So the key outcomes of my project is essentially guidance, templates, and tools to support guideline producers in producing guidelines that are likely to be much more useful to their end user. So let's think of a health professional who wants a guideline that will be useful to somebody in a consultation with a patient, that guideline will enable him or her to find the relevant information, but also then use that information in a direct discussion with the patient. So they'll use that material to support their conversation.
I think we've learned at EuroPD there's a lot of new exciting things happening in dialysis treatment, new ways of delivering healthcare with new technologies, eventually perhaps in the future wearable dialysis devices which will really liberate patients. We've also heard some interesting basic science, particularly things around individualizing care for patients.
There are several barriers to expand PD, and technology can help. We have different technologies in production, like new cyclers, new bags, new PD solutions. There are technologies of applications, like new prescription techniques, new modalities, and so on. And finally, information communication technology, which is very important today to help patients at home to feel somehow more compliant and to respond better to treatment prescription. There are two types of innovation. One is incremental, so you slightly improve whatever is already existing, quality of fluids, quality of materials, cyclers, techniques. Or you may have a radical innovation, the quantum leap, which could be represented by a change in paradigm like wearable artificial kidney, wearable peritoneal dialysis solution, microfluidics, and so on. Among different technologies, information communication technology can be strongly used for education and training of patients and physicians. Coming to meetings, EuroPD or others may strongly help the medical community to improve their knowledge, to share information, and to better perform their practice.
So whether you have been trained with Stanley Shaw or you have been trained...
So we both have an interest in fibrosis and inflammation and how they interplay in the peritoneal cavity. And I thought one of the highlights of this meeting so far was the information from the global fluid study showing that local peritoneal inflammation appears to drive changes within the peritoneal cavity.
We have good proof that this inflammatory response exists and appears to be the triggering factor that induces all the fibrotic process that is downstream of the inflammation. We have really new data in this field that points to a Th17 response as the major. Also, there appears to be a disbalance in between Th17 inflammatory cells and regulatory T cells. So it appears that there is a balance in favor of Th17 cells, which trigger the inflammatory microenvironment.
So one day, if we can change the balance between Tregs and Th17 cells, we may be able to impact on fibrosis.
I think so. I think, there are few papers published in the past that have suggested that probably triggering inflammation in the peritoneal local inflammation could be a good strategy to reduce fibrosis. But we still need to better define exactly what inflammatory process is taking place. If we can define this, probably we will get good targets for that.
Brilliant. Well, let's hope so.
I will be giving a short overview of the recent developments in biocompatibility research and focus on the clinical studies and the structured meta-analysis and reviews of these clinical studies. Over the past 30 years, we have had lots of research in that area, but we came from doing very simple experiments with very simple acute exposure models, then matured over the years to do more complex in vitro systems, do animal studies, and finally we arrived at what we actually needed, that is to do prospective randomized clinical trials to really show that there is a clinical benefit of the new fluids that we have suspected on the basis of our laboratory research, but that needed to be demonstrated also in the patients. My prediction is that in the absence of any side effects the new fluids could have on patients' well-being and clinical outcomes, the only thing which prevents more people to be put on the new solutions is the price differential. And my prediction is once the price is equal between the old fluids and the modern fluids, people will stop using the old fluids entirely. And I expect that to happen within the next few years.
Improving the knowledge of nephrologists and health practitioners in PD and home therapies in the future, it does represent a challenge. It's great when we have a conference like EuroPD, because EuroPD is well set up for doing that, and also it's attended by people who are already somewhat committed to this approach of care. But what we've really got to do is to reach out to those people who perhaps are not quite so ready to adopt that approach to renal care, putting the patient in the driving seat. And that's a challenge. I think we need to get perhaps the bigger societies more involved in that, delivering that sort of message and educational program. I think we can put patients in the driving seat. I think it's a possible thing to do. I think it's most important that this is seen as a collaborative effort. It's collaborative not just between the patient and the doctor or the health professional, but it's a collaborative thing for every renal unit or every department in every hospital to actually embrace. We have to all be signed up to doing that. But I think if we really go at it, it is quite possible to empower patients, put them in the driving seat, and I think as a result of that, their outcomes and satisfaction with their care will be considerably better.
That's all from us at EuroPD News. We hope to see you all at the conference in 2015.